Hey, this is Richie coming at you from the School of Marketing HQ. Before you dive into the show, I just want to tell you about a brand new short 12-week program we've launched called the Giants Marketing Masterclass. The program gives you access to insights and expert comments from over 25 CEOs and CMOs from major companies like Unilever, L'Oreal, M&S, Pret, and WPP, just to name a few. We focus on 6 key areas of marketing: customer, brand, commercial, creative, channel, and data and analytics. So if you were looking to upskill yourself or your team for just 2.5 hours each week and get access to a network with our industry's giants through our live sessions, do check out the School of Marketing website for more deets. Alrighty, for now, enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another fabulous show of The Places We'll Go with Richie and myself. And we've got another fine guest for you today. So I'm very pleased to welcome to the show Dino Myers-Lamptey. Welcome, Dino.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Richie. Great to be here. Thanks for having me this morning.
No, fabulous to have you on. Now, I know Dino well. We both sit on the Marketing Society board for the last couple of years, so know Dino well. And but I'm going to share with everybody else a little bit about Dino, just so you know who we're talking to today. So I think it's fair to say Dino's a bit of an agency icon. Yeah, I think we can say that. Founder of the Barber Shop, which, for those who don't know, is a strategy-led media creative and tech company that tries to solve the biggest communication challenges, but in a different way. So more creative and collaborative than probably your average agency model. Does have some big clients. TikTok is in there in the mix as well, which is awesome. But there's a lot more to Dino. So he's also co-chair of the Alliance of Independent Agencies, which is a really important body to further the causes and successes of indies. As I said, he's on the Marketing Society board. He's also a Marketing Society fellow as of a few months ago. That was a lovely occasion to see Dino anointed, and also a UK Council member of the FEs. And I would say an all-round good guy, razor sharp, both intellectually and also stylistically. So I've seen some of Dino's content outputs are pretty impressive, and certainly puts me to shame from a stylistic point of view. He's got the best pick biopic I've ever seen. Just in terms of Dino's course over time, he started out as a MediaCom planner, I think, planner and buyer for 3 years, and then moved into strategy roles, 5 years at PhD, also 7 stars, then went on to be MD of MullenLowe, MediaHub Digital, won FEs for the most effective agencies 2 years running, 2016-17. And then, as I said, founded the Barber Shop 4 years ago. I'm sure it's not all been perfect along the way. So we'll find out about Dino's story. And I do like Dino's point of view on the world. So we're going to get a bit of that. So I think you've been on many things. You've been on the Radio 4 Media show relatively recently as well. So I am really pleased to have you on the show, Dino. Welcome. And I hope you are on top form today.
That's a fantastic introduction. Can I take you wherever I go, Mark, just to repeat that as I walk into rooms?
Sold.
Sorry, Dino. He's all mine. He's all mine. So, we're going to have to split his time. But look, Dino, absolute pleasure to have you on. We've been looking and waiting for this moment for quite a while now. So it's great to be in the moment here. How are you? How's the last couple of weeks been for you?
It's been a good last couple of weeks. I've done quite a lot of things that have been packed in, I think. I had my son's birthday on the weekend. I went off to visit a friend in Zurich who was at Davos, which is a whole nother conversation of things that we could divert into. But we managed to be, get up a mountain and ski in minus 20 degrees C, which was the coldest I've ever experienced anywhere. Luckily enough, I survived that, no frostbite, came back, a load of different kind of business things going on, which have been kind of great and exciting. And I woke up and my toes hurting. So, it has been for the last few days. So, it's a sign of kind of getting on with life. So yeah, great.
Sounds good. Minus 20. I think could choose to avoid that. But let's do a shout out for your son. So what's your son's name and what did you do for his birthday?
Oh, great. Yeah. So my son's name's Jojo, we call him. His real name is Joseph. And he's 9 years old, and we had a little party around our house. Well, what we did is we started off. I opened up a burger shop at home. He had about 10 kids come over. I basically ripped off 5 guys and allowed them to have all the different kind of whatever things inside. But kids are surprisingly basic in their choices, apart from my kids that want it all in. But everyone else is like, yeah, I'll just have the burger with some cheese. But I had all the trimmings, and then we went to see Puss in Boots 2, which was a great movie. And then afterwards we went with a smaller group to give them, some of them their first taste of sushi in a sushi Japanese restaurant, which was cool as well.
My
So
God.
yeah, pretty jam-packed. And then some kids stayed up late. That was it, really.
Oh, very cool. I'll tell you what, the first time I ever had sushi was when I was about 18, and it seemed like the biggest adventure. Me and my brother ventured down to Yo Sushi in Edinburgh, and it felt like just the biggest deal ever. So your son, Jojo, certainly pipped me to that, almost half my age, and went out.
It's an exciting set of food,
Yeah.
kind of food experience, isn't it? All the different bits and the colors and everything. So yeah, they're spoiled. They're really spoiled.
Hey, wonderful. But look, talking about the likes of Five Guys, I mean, clearly you're an entrepreneurial guy. That's part of your nature. So tell us a little bit about the barber shop. Like, how did it come about, and how you jumped from sort of corporate land into your own gig as well.
Yeah, sure. So when I think about the barbershop, I mean, I really have to kind of like think, when I first started my career in the industry, because I think it was always a bit of a dream to at some point or another do my own thing. Before getting into the world of marketing, I had done various things at university and before, which were entrepreneurial in the spirit. So I mean, it's worth mentioning a few of those. I used to run with my brother and a couple of friends, a really big outdoor basketball tournament called the Triple Double. And it was in Essex, but it grew. It's still in Essex, but it was the biggest outdoor 3-on-3 basketball tournament for years. And that was all just done for charity and fun. We really did it because we remember going to Nike and Adidas and Converse. Even at first, they used to do outdoor basketball tournaments in Battersea Park, and they just stopped doing it in the 90s. So we decided to do our own version in Southend and see. And we had people coming down from Newcastle and all sorts. But the whole thing was one big kind of entrepreneurial endeavor. It was about how can we raise money for, to put it on. And we sold advertising the back of T-shirts, for example, the T-shirts that the players played in. So little small ads. It was like the classifieds at the back of the of a kind of standard Fruit of the Loom kind of shop that was designed by my brother. And so knocking on doors and raising money and all the rest of it and trying to get sponsors. And then, getting volunteers, rallying volunteers to be involved. So, that kind of like kicked off this kind of like, oh my God, you can actually do things. You can actually kind of create things in life that your parents haven't teed up for you. And then going to university, that really continued. We organized, really big club night, and lots of people know Gatecrash at the club. We organized a Tuesday night that was a student night there, a night called Jigsaw. And that was an incredible experience as well. We also did things like we created a student magazine. I was head of advertising of the radio station at some point. And then in my final year, I ran for election for a sports sabbatical officer, which was you had to do the hustings. It was like a really kind of political kind of position. It was a paid year position in Sheffield University. So you spent a year, you had a secretary, you had an office. It made you feel like you were doing a real job, but you were still, allowed to go into student bars and still drink and, and kind of like run your life a bit on student time. But, that was really interesting because it was really managing the finances and the facilities of like, about 30, 40 sports clubs and things like that. So I had this kind of taste for just kind of getting on with stuff and doing, a version of, my own thing. But getting into the industry, I started my career at the biggest, media agency, which was, a great strategic decision in my mind. I had a few different choices. Actually, it's probably worth saying, I tried to get into the advertising creative side of the industry first, and all I had was massive rejections. I didn't even have one interview. And as you could probably tell, my CV was pretty stacked with a lot of things. I thought at least surely someone would want to kind of at least have a conversation about, what's going on here, or at least flag me for like, you must be lying. You couldn't have done all this stuff, surely. But I didn't even get an interview, single interview. So I went on the IPA website and then saw some other jobs advertised for all companies that probably looked more like pharmaceutical companies than they did media or creative companies. They're all people's initials. So, we know like Mediacom, like OMD and, Starcom, they're all these like weird names. And I applied to a few, got a few interviews, got a few job offers for 3 very different jobs in the media industry. One was a media planner, which I was definitely, like the sound of the job the most. One was a TV buyer, and the other one was a press buyer. And I actually chose the job that didn't sound necessarily the best, but it was with the people that had the best kind of feeling from. And that was working at MediaCom, and I started my career as a press buyer. So I started off as a press buyer in MediaCom, which I did for a year, and then I was able to kind of like ask, request, negotiate my way into planning. And then I spent a couple of years in planning in MediaCom. Really looked around the company and saw, the strategy people, and I thought, oh, that's what I really want to do. But there's only a few people that were really in those positions in MediaCom, a massive company. So I made the leap to go to Michael Leeds and Bednash and do strategy there. And I think that, and this all leads to why I started the Barber Shop, because, I'd worked at a really big organization, a really successful organization at that time of the 2002, 2003, around that time. The whole industry was about growth and about size, about scale. And that's what buying in media was all about. It was about the bigger you are, the better deals you could get, the cheaper prices you could get for clients. And you had companies like Zenith being like, the ROI agency. And that seemed to be the only thing that could work. And I went to work at Michael Leeds and Bednash, which was big around the millennium, but and had some great accounts. We worked on Channel 4, Launchmore 4, E4 Music, all sorts, brought Film 4 free to air. There's lots of great stuff that happened in that period of time. However, it was a time when they were shrinking as an organization. They were sitting in this kind of weird gap of strategy that was neither kind of doing the buying or doing the creative, but they were briefing out all those kind of parts. And I think that a lot of bigger agencies got wise to, well, we've got to do more of what they're doing and, save money with our scale and all the rest of it. So they were being squeezed, and it was a difficult period of time for all involved there. But it was an incredibly immense and intense period of learning and being thrown in lots of different scenarios. But I think that at that point, and the significance of starting a barbershop is at that point, I pretty much decided that it was impossible to do my own thing and to create, a business that would be successful in the marketing industries, because they were an example of a business that was strong but was shrinking because it was being crowded out by the really big kind of growing large global organizations. And then I went to work for PhD and Rocket, and I worked for Rocket, which was kind of sister agency, joined at the hip to PhD, because I still wanted to have that element of small, a bit more kind of responsibility and control, doing things slightly differently, having a bit more kind of input into the running of the company. But pretty much at that time, I was convinced that it wasn't really going to happen to do my own thing. And but it was the story of the 7 stars was the thing that really kind of changed my mind about that. Because almost like it seemed like against the grain, there was a company that was growing, that I was hearing about, and that was winning, the odd award in places. And then I was contacted by a headhunter that I kind of knew and trusted, because he'd only ever got in contact with me about 4.5 years later, before when I was leaving Michael Leeds and Bednash, and he got in contact with me about a job that I very nearly took, that would have been, on paper, the best job for whatever, the 25-year-old, whatever age I was at the time, which was to work for Wieden Kennedy in Amsterdam, and that was to work on Nike, Heineken, I think it was, or Carlsberg, I think, and also EA Games. So it was sport, booze, and gaming, and which is absolutely incredible. And I actually went over there, and I met Tim Kennedy and the team, and it was like the best experience ever. I was so kind of convinced, but life and circumstances weren't ideal at the time. My wife, now girlfriend then, was doing her architecture course still, 7-8-year whatever course it was, and hadn't quite completed it. We were buying a house, and there's all these kind of complications going on, where I was thinking about, I'm gonna have to commute Monday to Friday Amsterdam. That's possible. Anyway, and they procrastinated quite a bit on just kind of giving the proper offer and things like that. And at the same time, I had interviews with Rocket and MEC, for which I got 2 job offers, and I was being pressured for a decision. And I actually chose Rocket. So at that point, so back to the whole 7 stars thing. I was contacted by that same recruiter, and he said, here's a great opportunity. I think you'd be perfect for it. They kind of, a reputation in buying, they're really strong there, which surprised me, because they were a relatively small agency. And he said, but they need strategy, and they haven't really got a strength in strategy. They want to grow and build a strategy department. So I entertained it and met the founders and was inspired by the founders, and then joined and then was there for 5.5 very successful years of rapid growth, and really seeing how the underdogs can really compete and win and beat and grow, but also for very sensible reasons that were the things that really surprised me was they could buy cheaper than the bigger companies. Things had changed, the market had changed, things had changed quite dramatically, things were being bought in a very different way. And that inspired me a lot to feel like, yes, that there was a possibility of bringing this kind of dream alive. And I very much only left the 7 Stars with a view of doing my own thing, but almost the route along the way and the path was being persuaded by the CEO of MullenLowe to come and pretty much do what I'd done with the 7 Stars to MullenLowe's MediaHub. And it was the words, there were 2 things that kind of flipped it for me, really, because I had no real reason to leave the 7 Stars other than I know that if I'd stayed, I would have never done my own thing, because it was almost, there was no real reason to leave, in a sense. And the words were, he said, what's the worst that can happen? Either in 5 years' time, we would have brought back the full service dream, so we would have brought and connected back creative, media, technology, brought it all back together, and we'll be celebrating and singing as heroes. Or in 2 years' time, it would all have failed, and we would have decided that, let's go off and do something else, and we'll do something else. And I was like, brilliant. I was like, well, he seems to be supportive of this kind of like alternate path if it needs to be that way. And I thought that's the kind of, that's the rod I needed, the poke or whatever, just to, and I think that you need, I've always thought that, entrepreneurs, like really successful entrepreneurs, are either like, at one end of the scale, in terms of either end of the scale, they're either, it's their last resort and they haven't, got other options. So they've got to just kind of go for it and throw the dice and take that massive risk. Or at the other end, where they really don't, the consequences are not as significant. What's the worst that can happen? They've got that kind of safety net, and they know they can fail. They know they can fail, so they do it, and they do it with confidence and ease, and it makes it successful. Because in the most successful entrepreneurs that I've worked for, I've seen a real difference compared to the people that have been employed in big companies in terms of how they make decisions, how they take, kind of rejection and setbacks, but also how they think forward and how they think, beyond the immediate term and think much more kind of longer term. And I think that gives a massive kind of advantage in business, basically, the ability to kind of, react and make quick decisions and be brave and bold. So yeah, so really, I went to the company knowing that, my kind of route and my desire was to do my own thing. And then the other kind of part of the decision was about making me a managing director rather than just a strategy person. So I was always, ever since kind of leading MediaCom, I always had strategy in my title. And it was really important to me to get exposed to the parts of the business that people wouldn't ordinarily allow you to be exposed to, because they were the boring parts, or boring, let's say boring important. People always say, oh yes, the important parts, whatever, the finance, this or that, which they are important, but they're not beyond your capability to learn and understand. They're more kind of shiny, exciting things, potentially, yeah, of course, but really, everyone should be getting an understanding of the boring parts, the HR side of things and things like that, the legal side of things. And I think that, just as a general theme throughout our industry, I think one of the big kind of problems and challenges of our industry is it pigeonholes people very, very quickly. And it goes, oh, okay, you need 3 years experience in this, or you are this, you are that. And then people just follow that path because they can't get another job because they've only ever done one thing. And they started off as, inquisitive, interesting people that wanted to get into creative industries because of the fact that they are generally, creative, think differently, interested in humans and all sorts. But then they're put into a specific side of the industry and told, oh, they're not allowed to come up with ideas, or they're not allowed to do strategy, or they're not allowed to do negotiation and buy. And that makes us all more weaker as a result of it. The way in which we can learn from lots of different people in different departments, and really, like in any job, the first 3 months you're going, what the hell is going on? I don't understand what's going on. The next 3 months you're going, okay, I get this. This is incredible pace. I get this. And then after that you're going, what was the big deal? In terms of this is all kind of like knowledge now. And you're always kind of learning new things, but you realize that everyone's learning new things all the time. But it's not this massive daunting, this thing's never been done before. It's how are we gonna solve it, and it's all down to you. It's never like that. You've got teams, you've got people, you've got support. And even in the position of being kind of managing director as well, I took advice, and if you have a financial person that's on your side, then it makes the job a lot easier. If you have a financial person that's not on your side, it makes the job a lot harder. So yeah, a long story.
Well, I'm exhausted. I need to lie down. You talk about rocket. I mean, there's a literal as well as a metaphorical thing. Triple double basketball sounds amazingly fun. Of course, you were head of advertising at the university, I think radio show. I also was a sports president or sports officer, athletic union officer at Nottingham. So I don't know if you know Bonnie Hayward, but she maybe have been a few years ahead.
Yeah, that sounds very much rings a bell. Yes.
1995 to 96, Bonnie was my oppo. She was at Sheffield, I was at Nottingham. And then, of course, great choice to start MediaCom. And shout out to all the folks there. That's MediaCom bookend. My career started with MediaCom at Mars and ended at Direct Line. You said something really interesting. I mean, amazing story and trajectory. And you said something about entrepreneurs make decisions and recover from setbacks. It's different. It's a different mode, a different pattern of thinking. So tell us a bit more about what that entrepreneurial decision making and recovery and resilience is from your point of view.
Yeah. I think about it quite a lot, and in terms of what is the difference, and when you're starting the Barber Shop, I thought about founders, and I spoke to a couple of people that I wanted to be co-founders, really, because I didn't want to really do the journey alone. And one of the things that I realized was not a lot of people have that entrepreneurial kind of bone, I guess, and it's that kind of like appetite to take a risk, but not to be kind of too tied by it and too kind of all consumed by it, really, because I think that it's one of those things of you have to make a lot of decisions that can have a lot of potential kind of impact, and financial impact, financial insecurity, and all the rest of it, and you've got to really kind of like think through what's the worst that can happen, but at some point the worst that can happen can be pretty bad if you overthink it. So you've got to almost stop yourself from thinking about what the worst is going to happen. It's like, well, what's the worst happen? Yes, okay, but that's not going to happen, right? So I think you need to. There's a thing that I kind of like termed, which is well, I've got about 4 books that I want to write, and I'm convinced I'm never going to have the time to write them. So I just tell people, like going to the gym in January or to get a personal trainer and saying, oh, I'm losing weight or whatever, suddenly makes you feel like you have to do it. But one of the titles of the book is called Forgettability. They've all got good names. That's it. That's about the one kind of consistent theme about the books. But it's the ability to forget. And I think that there's a power in almost having a poor memory, in a sense of, poor memory for certain things, a poor memory for like, hard times, pain, like suffering, like, the awful things that can happen. And I think that entrepreneurs share that same thing, that same kind of asset. Because the ability just to get on with things and go, okay, well, that didn't work, but I'm not going to stop and get hung up by that. I'm going to just do something else, or next time I'm going to make it work, or really work out why it didn't work, I think is the really key thing. And I think that the people that I know that I would say are less entrepreneurial, overthink certain things, think very personally about things, think about how it might affect themselves, their reputation, and go down that spiral of concern. When if you have a relatively poor memory for certain things, then I think you kind of like, you just don't remember the last time it felt bad. And also, I think you also think that, oh, people won't remember that, whatever, carry on. And the thing is as well, I think that, go through an experience of bad experiences, like every agency I left or I was at, you could definitely dwell on certain kind of bad experiences, even before being in the agency world. But in hindsight, you always look at them as good experiences in terms of, not good in terms of they weren't kind of, but they were definitely character building in some way or form, where you learn how to navigate a certain situation, or that made you do this thing, which was really weird and different. But next time that comes along, you're prepared for it, you're ready for it. And I just think of a career and a life when you haven't had those things, you would feel very vulnerable, you would feel very, insecure, because you don't know what's going to happen and how you're going to deal with it. And I think you have to have those experiences. You have to force yourself to have those experiences when the consequences are not so significant. When you haven't got kids, mortgage, all the rest of it. You got to do it when you can.
Honestly, that's really quite profound in many ways, and I absolutely love the notion of forgettability. And I think for all of us, as we've probably traversed these last couple of years have probably a few things that are, worthwhile just thinking about. Maybe we need to just put them to the back of our minds and sort of move and brush off. So I love that notion. Really, really cool. Dino, I want to kind of turn the page a little bit on the conversation. And I know how much of a champion of diversity you are across our industry. Like us, and the reason why the School of Marketing was founded was very much on that same ilk. And so I'd love to get your point of view. There was a recent survey just come out, which was the Marketing Week Career and Salary Survey, which had pretty disturbing stats for me. And maybe you've seen it, but the upshot was when looking at salaries and average salaries for different ethnic groups, it came out that someone like myself of mixed race, or someone like yourself who's Black, actually had a significant disadvantage throughout our careers, compared to white people. And it really upset me, and it almost made me take a deep breath and go, can I actually champion this industry anymore when that's the status quo? Can I drive in? Can I truly feel passionate about getting more diverse talent into our industry when actually that's the reality that's going to be faced? And I don't know if you have a point of view on it, or how more generally you see the landscape of bringing more diverse talent into our space.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. And Mark at the start of this podcast mentioned quite a few things I'm involved in, and something that I'm involved in is called Media for All as well. But it's two other things. I mean, Media for All and Brixton Finished School as well, which is very similar to the purpose and point of School of Marketing, and united by trying to get more people into our industry, get more diversity in our industry. But it's worth me telling the story of Media for All and kind of like why it exists. So Naren Patel, really through talking to a few people, myself and others, over the course of, a couple of years, probably mainly at awards dues, where everyone's kind of like having a good time, and you look around the room and you go, hang on a minute, you can spot the diversity very easily, because, it's kind of like a sea of color, and there's very little differentiation in the color, particularly those that go on stage to collect the awards. And that's one of the things that's always struck me, unfortunately, is because people sometimes celebrate the diversity, but yet the awards dues are really the people that people choose to take to the functions. They pick, and they go, right, this is my team, you're going to come up and celebrate with me. And I think that that's the biggest problem we have in our industry, in terms of it's not necessarily just getting people in, but it's opening the doors and giving them access and providing environments that people, this term psychological safety, can really contribute and be their best. So I when people talk about the benefit of diversity, so McKinsey, there's not a shortage of reports, like McKinsey reports into diversity and things like that, about the financial benefit of diversity into business. So everyone should kind of like agree that that is the case. However, what I say is that we don't even know the true benefit, the true potential, because we're in industries where the representation isn't necessarily where it should be in terms of reflective of society. So those people that are in it are not necessarily being their full selves and bringing their full selves to the party and to the table, and therefore they're not giving their all. So that company and that true benefit of diversity is not really even being kind of understood or seen, because the only way that most people can understand it easily is when they look at gender, for example, because I think that it's very easy for people to know that they are not the other gender, for example. So it's very easy for a male to know that they're not a female, and or to certainly feel different when they're in a room full of females. Similarly, a woman to feel different when they're in a room full of males. And that gives you a slight kind of insight into the experience of a woman sitting on a boardroom when there's 10 men or 7 men, whatever it is, and there's one woman. And it's only when you work through a certain issue and a certain topic and you go, so for example, let's say you're in a boardroom and there's one female and you're the female and you're talking about maternity benefits. And you think, is that woman going to say truly the same thing that she would say if she was in a room that was more balanced, that was 50-50 male, female, or the other way around? Would the conversation be exactly the same? Would it go in the same way? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's not a single way it would do, unless she was mimicking and taking on the values and the views of a man, and she was basically just kind of reflecting those, which there's a high chance that she would do, because that's probably what got her there in the first place, because that's how that door opens. And the problem is with our industry is that doors open and humans are flawed in the sense that they recruit people like them. They want to work with people like them. They almost champion and support people that are almost like childlike figures. You know, they see themselves in that person. They go, oh great, you know, they're just like me, great, you know, the team was a little special project, and that leads to kind of like mentoring and things like that, and that's almost like the best mentoring, kind of really takes someone on in that way. But the problem is they, you know, if you have one type of person at the top, then you just feed in and give opportunities to similar type people coming through. And the biggest issue that we have is in the creative industries, we should be the biggest, you know, flag wavers of, you know, just misfits, different thinkers, different things, different ways of doing things, different approaches, and about the benefits of it. I use reference in the analogy of our industry is like the music industry is pre-1960 or 59, whatever it is. And you might say, okay, what is that? And well, that was the creation of Motown. So, you know, what was music like before? Yeah, music was lovely, you know, but what has music been like since? You know, when you think about what, you know, a completely diverse organization brought to the industry, and what it is kind of like since kind of propelled, you know, all the different genres of the different styles, all the different ability for people to create their own things and come out of nowhere and become stars and all the rest of it. You know, it's incredible. I mean, we're at that kind of like, you know, early stages of our industry, really, because we haven't had this kind of input of diverse people with the permission to create, permission to do things differently, permission to really bring themselves to the table and learn from other cultures and experience and all the rest of it. So I think that it's just a really big disadvantage for our industry. So when I look at salary surveys and things like that, I think it's just a pity and it's a real shame. I think that on one hand, you know, no one ever really got into our industry through not knowing someone or someone kind of like, you know, helping them in some kind of way. I mean, yes, there are a few exceptional examples. I mean, I did just send my CVs in, but, you know, my sister, my cousin, they've all had the help of me going, this is the way to do it, or, you know, guiding in some kind of way. And most people have that. Most people have got far in their careers because they've had that kind of help. And when you are from a diverse background that, you know, let's face it, your parents encourage you to be something of a more of a secure profession. So whether it's medicine or engineering or, you know, architecture or something like that, you know, that's what they encourage you to do, because, you know, for good reasons as well, because you've got more job security, you know, there's a progression, you can work anywhere, all the rest of it. So when you're going into a bit more of an experimental place where there isn't this set path, then it's rightful that people are slightly more skeptical about, you know, your progression, how you're going to do in that place. But then people don't know the rules of navigation. So they don't know that when you get in, you're not necessarily going to be treated fairly or paid the amount you deserve unless you bring that negotiation to the table, unless you really do understand your value that you're adding and always make that case, you know. So I think it's really important to have networks like Media for All to help people progress through. We talk about recruit, but also retain and rise to the top as well, which is really important. You can't forget those other elements of it. But the last thing I'll say about this is if the pay gaps will make you weep, then you wait till they publish the bonus pay gaps. You know, that'll make you even sadder, unfortunately.
So Dino, Richie and I were very privileged to talk to John Amici a little while back. And he said, you know, he's tired of this. It's glacial. The progress is glacial. So in that context, what would be your call to action to everybody, the industry and everybody individually? Not an easy question, but what would you say?
Yeah, it's not an easy question, and but I've had the benefit of thinking about it for a long period of time. You know, there's not been any shortage of kind of panels, discussions, and reports, and all the rest of it. So my answer on it is really quite clear, I think. I think it has to be taken out of the hands of the people that are, you know, sitting around a table and deciding the strategy about how to do it. If this was a client brief, I think we would have solved it a long time ago. I think there's two parts of it. I think that firstly, we need to just demand more transparency on data at every level. So unfortunately, the surveys and the things that happen, to my disappointment, are not as granular as they need to be. They're not showing diversity, you know, how it trends throughout organizations, particularly big organizations. Of course, you know, if you're an organization under a certain size, then, you know, the data can be skewed too easily. But, you know, an organization of a certain size should be publishing their data transparently, so the recruiters know, and the recruiters can tell the people that are applying for the job, this is what the company looks like inside out. You know, so you know, I want people just to know, you know, I want talent, diverse talent, to make better decisions in their careers by going to the places that actually care, that are moving the dial, that are actually showing progression, and have got the people at the top going, I endorse this company, they've been brilliant. Because there are those companies out there, but the problem is they're being clouded by all the other companies that are claiming to do initiatives, but really just not putting enough time and effort and attention to the details and the areas. I mean, it's all well and good, launching an initiative because you think it might benefit people, but if the results don't improve, then you've got to go for a different plan. And I think that another large part of it is about getting people at the top, not just thinking at the bottom, not just thinking about the entry level. When people come into companies, they need to see that there is a path, and they need to be inspired by people above who are not just the head of HR or DE&I officer. They've got to be people in real positions and real jobs, in terms of, those not real, as in the real functions that influence what the company produce, the product of the company. So they've got to be sales, they've got to be technology, they've got to be data, or they've got to be chief operating officers, whatever it is, or strategy. And I think that the shortcut to that is very easy. If you can't solve it quickly within your own company, then get a non-exec director in. I mean, even at the top of government, people somehow manage to move around to take control of departments they've got no experience of in the slightest. So I'm not saying that's a good thing, but what I'm saying is you can learn from people coming from different industries, different places, and bringing their expertise to change things in your organization. So a non-exec director at the top is a very simple, quick fix that can help inspire. But the other thing I would say is that it is changing, and what's going to change is you've got the likes of Legal & General who are making investments based upon ESG metrics. So they're setting their companies hard targets on diversity, representation at the highest levels. And if they don't achieve those targets, they're pulling their financials, they're pulling their investments, and they're making that public as well. More of that is going to make people change. Just the same way that the environment that we need to, incredibly rapidly change, our concern about, the climate and what we're doing in terms of media and marketing, it's exactly the same way that we've got to change and think about diversity, which is make the money do the talking and let the money motivate people to quickly make change. And I think that's definitely going to happen. And I know that there's things going on with LinkedIn as well, which haven't really been published yet. But in terms of allowing identity to be revealed, in terms of diversity of companies and things like that, allowing people to disclose and offer that information. And I think that will massively change the way companies operate, because, as I said, once you can know from the outside in what the company looks like, then you make your decisions, the talent goes to the right places, and the competitive advantage of that business will show and will shine.
Well, there's certainly some great reasons to be optimistic in what can come across as quite gloomy data sets. And you really struck a chord when you just said your last comment around the bonus pay gap. So I'm both intrigued, but probably a bit saddened at the same time. It really reminds me of a conversation we recently had with Cindy Gallop, and she's a wonderful force of nature, wonderful. And she went quite provocative in nature, where she was talking about how people at the top in these industries actually have very little incentive to do anything more than talk a good game on these things. And when advising young people, she was very much of the ilk of, carve your own paths and then get bought out by these people. That's where the true value lies. But she was absolutely, headstrong about helping to solve this big major challenge.
Yeah, I mean, Cindy's absolutely brilliant, and everything she says is absolutely bang on in terms of right. And I think that advice is good advice. I mean, when I started my career, it's not the advice I was giving people at the time when I started my career, because of the shape of the industry and what it was. We did entrepreneurial things, but there seemed to be to some degree a ceiling then. But because of digital media now, in terms of everyone looks to young people to be the people that understand that thing better than they do. The mistake that too many people make in our industry is become internal managers of people in politics rather than specialist practitioners of certain things. So I think that young people have that potential advantage, really get stuck in. If you've got time, you can learn new things, and those new things become the most important things tomorrow. So absolutely. I mean, there's great examples. I mean, Timothy Amu, Fan Bites, great example. Great example of and there's tons of those kind of really good companies that are doing really excellent things, which a lot of the time, the big organizations that we talk about that we work with just aren't even really aware of. They aren't really aware of until they read it in the FT that they were bought by X company for X million because they were doing this well. So yeah, you definitely can carve your path now. It's a lot easier than it was before in that sense, and I definitely encourage it. It's just we also as people, more senior people in the industry, need to shine a light on those businesses as well earlier on, because some of them just struggle with the exposure and getting in front of people and get past that kind of trust barrier, which is really important.
So, Dino, the time has whizzed by, and I think we're now at the end for the last question. You've brought a reality to this conversation, but also an energy and an optimism, and you talk a lot of sense. You're in your prime, loads to look forward to. So I'm keen to understand what are you ambitious for? Where are you going to take the Barber Shop? What are you excited about for the future?
So the thing that's always excited me about the industry is how much it changes so quickly. And it seems like for anyone listening that's not in our industry, it will seem like everything's changed so quickly in the last few years because of the weirdness of the world that we live in. But truly, in terms of in our industry, whenever you get to a point where you feel like, okay, I kind of get it and understand it, as this as that, then something comes up and completely transforms the thing that was sitting at the top of the tree and very comfortable in that position. And in recent years, you can point to things like TikTok being a good example of how that's completely come out of nowhere, but just kind of completely stormed the market in terms of what it is. But also the likes of things like Netflix, and there's suddenly like Netflix now offering advertising, and Disney Plus and all sorts, and just so many significant things constantly change. So every big organization that we have in our industry are constantly thinking about how to stay relevant, not die, how to go to the next thing, and the explosion of things like gaming and everyone, like last year we were talking about the metaverse, which isn't a thing. We're talking about NFTs, we're talking about blockchain, all these different things, and now literally over the last couple of months we're talking about ChatGPT, and it seems like someone has opened the coffin of AI and everything's come out of it, and it's just like, hang on, where's all this stuff come from? This is incredible. Like there seems to be AI that solves everything, when we've been living going, oh yeah, everyone talks about AI, but how's it really changed this thing I'm doing? How's it really changed this program? And then suddenly in a very short period of time, it's all falling into place a bit, and we're going, oh my God, this is going to change everything. This is going to completely change everything. And I think that is so exciting / worrying. A lot of people are worried about the effects it's going to have on marketing, media, creativity. I'm actually really quite excited about it, because I think that the most important human skill and rarest commodity is creativity and thinking kind of differently around problems. And I think that in a world where there's lots of confusion, I mean, in our business with the Barber Shop, what has happened as a result of COVID and all the rest is that things have become more unpredictable. It's harder to kind of forecast any bit of business, and anything in 6 to 9 months is nearly impossible. But whenever things get worse in terms of the economy gets worse, the cost of living crisis, or like we had in COVID, what ends up happening is we start to get more calls because people have bigger problems. Suddenly people have to do things differently, and people are looking to not just carry on as they were and get their 10% growth every year. They're going, hang on a minute, we're going to lose 20%, we're going to lose 30%. So what can we do to maintain even, or just to make that loss not as significant? And I think people start to appreciate alternative models and ways of working. So that at the heart of the barbershop has always been this idea of agility and working with the best talent, wherever they may be. And while it was this kind of concept of remoteness and tapping into talent before COVID was seen like, people don't really like to work that way. COVID forced it, and suddenly it's like, well, of course people work that way. Why haven't we been? And what it means now is we can tap into talent around the whole world, but there's also a lot more people that want to work flexibly on their own terms, do their hours they want to do around, taking their kids to school, and all these kind of great things that's come off the back of it. So we've got access to more talent. But really what my kind of view is, which I had originally with the barbershop, and I want to explore a bit more, is become a bit more of an enabler for consultants that want to be doing their own thing, and help facilitate that with the central resources of the barbershop, but help to bring in extra different bits of expertise as a one fit in thing to the barbershop. And I call it kind of like a franchise model, but allowing people to set up and start and grow different outposts of the Barber Shop that always work within our kind of formula and way of working, but bring something new and different to the mix as well. So as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, you have that security of, well, I can go on holiday. You know, I've got a team that can do some runs and some research and can do some things and can do some handling, some back end things. But also you've got, you've just got a team to brainstorm off and things like that. But ultimately you're running your own business like an entrepreneur, and you're benefiting from that. And I see that as a global thing as well. So us connecting to more people around the globe in that way. And I love this idea of a 24-hour service for a client as well, where we all get to sleep, but we get to pass work on to people we trust and know can complete certain tasks and move the job on. And we wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, great. A human probably assisted with AI has helped me massively in the last 7 hours.
Oh, Dino, wow. I mean, what you've probably inadvertently done is express potentially the new sort of global mode of working for so many sort of types of organizations. So what a way to end the show, and actually with a real thrust of excitement, as the world is ambiguous, but yet the marketers' role in that ambiguous world is just super exciting. So first of all, a massive thank you to you. It's been a tremendous conversation. It really has. I'd like to just recap some of the key themes that I've taken away from this in just a minute or so. It really struck me that, from the outset, one thing that you wanted to do, and paraphrasing here, is that you always had a dream to do your own thing. And it felt like from an early age, from an early start, you were kind of, ebbing and flowing with those entrepreneurial ideas, whether it be from basketball to nightclubs, right through to student magazines and radio. Definitely, marketing was in your blood in that respect. But interestingly, all of the entrepreneurial bit was put a little bit on hold to hone in and learn the craft. And in doing so, you interestingly chose people over a potential role. And I find that fascinating. And, we always hear about the role of actually choose the right people and you leave for your boss, not your company. And I think you really, you really did the smart move, particularly because you only happen to choose the biggest agency as well, which is amazing. But disappointing that it may be, around that sort of not getting any interviews for the creativity. I think we have kind of gone through some of the symptoms and issues that we are facing as an industry, and both, the yin and yang of excitement and being saddened at the same time, as we do that. You talked about some of the big moves, the potential big moves, Wyden and Kennedy, sports, boom, gaming. My God, who could have wanted anything better? But also how, you were able to kind of see past that and actually then, take on some really big lofty roles, whether it be 7 Stars or MullenLowe, and the way in which you talked about the need to be an MD, and sort of shed the strategic elements and actually get a bit more broad and taking on a broader role with other departments, I think has really rounded you off as you then leaped into that entrepreneurial journey with the Barber Shop. You described entrepreneurship, I think, to a T, in that there are 2 types of people in the world, right? It's almost necessity entrepreneurs versus ones who are calmed and collected and then do things and have successes because they know their place and they're confident in their place as they go through. I would love to hear the other 3 book titles from you at some point, but Forgettability was absolutely classic, and I think we could all learn a little bit more from that. I've taken that away as a big takeaway from me, and there are a few things that I do need to kind of put in the past, so that's great. A lot around diversity, and actually the role of psychological safety and making people safe in their role, not just to facilitate people coming in, but actually keeping them there and making them live their own selves and be themselves. I love the analogy with gender and gender in the boardroom as a great analogy for us to think about. The final thing, of course, just around that sort of changing industry landscape and a reason to be positive for all of us as marketers. We're not getting people into a defined pathway. We're actually perhaps the slightly more risky option, but with risk comes reward, and with risk comes a great journey to talk of. So Dino, I hope I've done you justice, but it's just, again, from me, just a massive thank you. It really has been an honor.